We've noticed today that the leading opposition, Mr. Norton, and suspended MP Ganesh Maipal have responded to some things that were raised in the press conference we had yesterday at the convention center while the sitting was going on. Let me just deal with maybe Mr. Maipal first. In terms of Mr. Maipal, he appears to have a comprehension problem, because I do believe that yesterday I very carefully outlined the issue in regards to the reasons why the motion that was submitted by the leading opposition was rejected by the Speaker. And I want to reiterate what I said then, and that is that the motion they're referring to was never seen by anybody on the government side. The normal procedure when you ask for an adjournment to allow for debate on a matter of definite, urgent public matter requires that the mover brings a motion, which, as I said, we never saw. We can only judge by what Mr. Norton said on the floor. And of course, we heard the Speaker's rejection of it. As I said then, that there's particular standing orders that require and guide the Speaker on his rulings, and guide all of us as members of Parliament, by the way. And so the Speaker operated on the advice of the Clerk as well, and both of whom, including the Clerk, is by constitution advisor to the Speaker on matters that relate to procedures and parliamentary matters. The Speaker made it very clear that the motion was rejected. One, it was not urgent. Two, that it was anticipating a matter that was coming before the House, which is not allowed in the standing orders, if you check it yourself under admissibility of motions in the standing orders. So that, and furthermore, I said that the leading opposition was asking or pressuring the Speaker to collude with him with regards to violating the Constitution, with regards to what he pointed out in terms of the clean voters list, and to violate or to disregard, at the mildest, the ruling of the Chief Justice and the courts of Ghana with regards to residency. It is very clear that Mr. Maipal, all of this must have gone over Mr. Maipal's head, because the courts of Ghana ruled on the issue of residency. Therefore, what does that mean? It said that you could remove people who had died through the provision of legitimate, obviously, death certificates. It did rule that there's no residency clause in our Constitution nor in our legislation, and therefore anybody, once they're registered and they may emigrate, they may go live in another region, they're allowed to vote in the elections. There was no provision in the Constitution to remove anybody based on the residency clause, as there was none. Therefore, when I spoke yesterday, I said that the leading opposition was trying to entangle the Speaker in what would be an act that would disregard the courts of Ghana and the Constitution. Because Mr. Norton's objective to clean the voters list is really about removing migrants. That is the bee in his bonnet. That's what he focuses on all the time. And as I said then, I see one of the press carried it, but they seem to have misunderstood my sarcasm. And that was that if Mr. Norton was so preoccupied that all those who are living overseas should be taken off the list, then it meant that Mr. Norton, in his paranoid mind, seemed to have felt that everybody living abroad would vote for the PPC. And that is obviously not true. Obviously, we know that people overseas, if they come back to Ghana, will vote for the party of their choice. Some will just vote for PPC, others will vote for APNU AFC, others will vote for another party. That is their right. So this whole issue of the so-called motion to deal with the clean voters list and voter impersonation was one that the Speaker could not comply with, particularly as on that day, Monday, November 7th, the first reading of the two bills on electoral reform were tabled. That is the registration amendment to the Registration Act, and also the amendment to the Representation of the People's Act, ROPA. And therefore, once tabled, there's going to be a debate, and the debate will come up before the end of the year, obviously. So that in that context, Mr. Norton cannot be, and Mr. Mayapol cannot be ignorant to the fact that no matter how they talk about their clean voters list, that is, removal of migrants, that is a constitutional matter. The issue of residency is a constitutional matter that will have to come up in the constitutional reform process. And if the PNC, APNU, AFC feels this is a matter of great urgency, I assume they will lead the battle on that issue. But the Constitution makes it clear, and one cannot fly in the face of the Guyana Constitution nor of the courts. When the court ruled in 2019, I think it was August 2019, on the residency issue, there was no appeal to that decision. The APNU, AFC, nor any other individual or organization went to the court to appeal the ruling of the Chief Justice with regards to residency. And I remember in the earlier ruling, the Chief Justice had ruled on the issue of dual citizenship, and that was dealt with and upheld by the Court of Appeal as well. So that these issues, it appears that Mr. Mayapol did not comprehend, or just wants to be the public to remember he's still there because he's suspended and therefore cannot go within the precincts of the Parliament or attend Parliament whatsoever. So maybe he's trying to have his Parliament outside. The issue of impersonation, which was raised by Mr. Norton on the floor, and appears to also come into the issue, the statement issued by Mr. Mayapol. We remember that the APNU had claimed there was persons who were voted for persons who are dead, etc., and those who may have been overseas, and they made this claim. And the police are investigating the matter, as we know. However, I understand that the list that APNU keeps claiming to have, and claiming that somebody has it, whether it's GCOM or the police, that in fact they have not provided that information, so that the list of persons who they claim may have been impersonators has not been provided, and therefore the police cannot verify whether these persons are alive or dead in Guyana or out of Guyana. In addition to that, there's another investigation, as we know, that the issue of the claims statements of poll. The PNC has still not made these available to the public to substantiate their claims of differences in figures, etc., etc. And so my advice to both Mr. Mayapol and Mr. Norton is that it may be wise for them to submit their statements of poll to the Commission of Inquiry, which is the body that will be examining all the claims and all the issues that are raised leading up to the elections and up to a particular point in the electoral process. And so if there's a claim of voter impersonation, I believe the APNU AFC should provide to the police the list of the persons and their addresses who they claimed voted in the 2020 elections, and they should also provide that and the statements of poll, their statements of poll, to the Commission of Inquiry. So that's as far as I wish to respond to Mr. Mayapol. Mr. Norton, in a statement also today, spoke about the preliminary list of electors for the local government elections. I'm afraid I don't know who is advising Mr. Norton, or whether Mr. Norton takes advice, maybe more accurate, but that the preliminary list of electors for local government elections does not usually contain constituencies. So what Mr. Norton says, there's a list of electors, but it's by division. It does include constituencies, and local government elections requires people to know which constituency they are in. The problem with Mr. Norton's statement is that the list of electors are broken down into constituencies when the list becomes an official list of electors, not the PLE, which is the preliminary list of elections. So the preliminary list of elections is the final get-go for people to check their names on the list, their ID card numbers, their addresses. Is that correct? And that where there's something wrong, there's a spelling mistake or something, or if someone has died in the meantime, they can bring these matters forward to the GCOM offices. On the conclusion of that, and in addition to that, we will remember in prior to 2016 and 2018 elections under the APNO-FC government, they changed a number of the boundaries of the NDCs and the municipalities. And so Minister Nigel Darren-Lal has issued orders which were circulated in Parliament yesterday, but are also on the official gazette since, I think, early October, that has reverted a number of the boundaries of a number of the NDCs to ante-2016. So in other words, some of the boundaries of the NDCs, which were changed by the former Minister Bulkan, have been reverted to what they were ante-2016. Secondly, all this is in a consultative process which Minister led, went to communities, went to NDCs, etc., and so out of that came these boundary shifts, in other words, going back to what was before 2016 changes and 2018 changes made by Minister Bulkan. Furthermore, in one of the communities, one of the NDCs, I think it is 5274, this is 20 villages making up one NDC, that this has been split in two to allow for two NDCs, for much more efficient management of an NDC where you have 20 villages, almost impossible to manage if you know the quarantine, etc. So that is the other change that is made. And so Minister Nigel, I believe, will have a meeting with the press to describe this in greater detail and to explain the procedures he went through, the consultations he went through with the public, etc. The point is that Mr. Norton has got it all wrong again. The PLE does not include constituencies for the purpose of the local government elections. Once the process has gone through the final correction, review by the voters, and it turns into the official list of electors, the constituencies will then be reflected in the official list. And as I said, including now what is a reversion to ante-2016 boundaries, to allow for the GCOM now to create the constituencies based on those boundaries. As I said, Mr. Norton likes to make a mountain out of a molehill, as they say, but fundamentally he needs to have good legal advice, and he seems not to be having it. By the way, in relation to good legal advice, the issue with regards to, we noticed that Mr. Norton is talking about local government elections and appears to have started his campaign, who knows. But the issue is that he is, whichever community is going to, he's focusing on division and not building and not re-engaging. It is all a basis of division. And so he goes to Mocha recently, and he's talking about ancestral lands. He goes to another community and it's talking about apartheid and racist government. As we said in Parliament yesterday on the floor, that the distinction between the 1999-2001 Constitutional Reform Commission era and probably what will be in this new process of constitutional reform starting early next year is that the political environment for the opposition is led by a person who is focused on division and not on building trust and working in a collaborative way, even on issues that they think are important with the government or with others. And so I'm forced to recall that Mr. Roysdale Ford, who is a member of Parliament, as you know, in the contest that took place in the PNC for the leadership of the PNC, Mr. Ford surprisingly stated that his competitor, Mr. Norton, Aubrey Norton, was a racist. And if the PNC came under the leadership of Mr. Norton, it would be a racist party. One is wondering and thinking about what Mr. Roysdale seems to know a lot more than many of us, but that the point is that maybe he has a point there, that all of the focus of Mr. Norton appears to be on division and ethnic division and polarizing communities. Polarizing communities. As we said yesterday in Parliament, we went through a whole process of consultation and opportunities for any and everybody, including civil society and political parties, to bring forward changes to the electoral laws that we drafts, which were available. And I pointed out in my statement several statements ago that with due recognition of the former General Secretary of the PNC and the former chairperson of the PNC, that is Amna Ali and Valda Lawrence, respectfully, that they had both requested hard copies of the laws when we put them out. Somehow, maybe they got lost in the transition between the different leaders of the PNC. But the point is that the PNC has never used, APNU-FC has never used the opportunity to table amendments. It is all about fluff and talk and creating these images without, and as I said yesterday, smoke and mirrors, that it is not about constructive engagement. It's not about constructive engagement. And so if they feel strongly on many of these issues, they have a right to engage on them. So we'll see when we come to the electoral reform bills before the end of this year, when they're debated, whether the PNC APNU-FC will bring amendments to the House on some of these issues they feel strongly about. To go back on the removal of persons who have died from the list, and I think we had mentioned this before, and that is that the amendments we've made to the registration and ROPA allow for the GCOM, and I said this yesterday actually, to remove persons from the voters list who had died. That there was this administrative practice that GRO was supposed to send periodically the list of persons who had died, and the GRO would take them, or the GCOM would take them on. It's now in the law that GRO is required to submit periodically list of not only the list of names, they have to provide copies of death certificates. They cannot just list someone as dead. They have to have a document verifying the person has died, and that is the death certificate, to GCOM, and GCOM would then remove those names from the list. Of course, there are persons who died overseas. That would be difficult for GCOM to handle, or the GRO, as well as persons who may have died without ever having got a death certificate. So that there's an explanation for many of these things, but Mr. Norton seems to be averse to listening to logics, to facts, to law, to constitution, and just seems to like spewing misinformation all over the place. So I just wanted to comment on not only the two statements by Mr. Mayapol and Mr. Norton, but also to add in what is clearly issues that are still current in relation to the claims of APNU-AFC with regards to the persons they said impersonated, and the mystic list, and the mystic list with addresses, as well as the mystic statements of Paul, which have now it is two and a half years later, is it? Has continued to be locked away in somebody's cabinet and cannot come out.